Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here today to share with the 8th grade the extension of our keynote from Career Speaker Day. As all of our 8th graders know, we had a wonderful day in March where all of you got to hear different career speakers come. And Governor Benson was hoping to be here that day, but as you'll find when you go to the work world, many times at work your schedule doesn't go like you expect. And he had gotten called away that day to testify up at the State House. But I do want to share for some of you that didn't hear the story about why we asked Governor Benson to be the keynoter. It was certainly important for us to have some major figure in government at that day, but that's not actually why we asked Craig Benson to come speak with us. The story goes back earlier to when we did the job shadowing. 8th graders, you'll remember that as we started talking to you about job shadowing, we knew it would be hard for you to find people to shadow. We'd have people say, I want to do forensics and detective work, or I want to be a pilot. And most of you remember that I came around in the cafeteria every day and said, tell me what job you're looking for, I'll try to find you some phone numbers. Well, Jared Pierce, who's here on stage with me, was one of the students who came, and he came up one day and said, well, I'd like to maybe see a social studies teacher or someone in government, like a senator or somebody. And I gave him the numbers for a senator, but I said, they'll be in D.C. You know, you may not be able to see them. I said, Jared, don't let that stop you from your dream of finding out what you want to know. Contact the State House up in New Hampshire, and certainly somebody will show you around. Well, what little did we know with that small beginning, the big ending that would happen, because he got the job shadow all day long with Governor Benson and his staff, and got to explore the State House. And I know that a lot of you that did job shadow, because over 200 of you went out and got a contact and went out that day. That was absolutely fabulous. And I've heard from many of you about what a wonderful day you had with your parents, or getting to go climb inside of helicopters or airplanes, or getting to work with people in drama or in arts or various activities that you went to. And certainly we hope that all of you got a lot out of that as far as learning that what you're going to go on to do in high school really will pay off so much when you get a job that you're passionate about and that you love. So it's a real pleasure that Mr. Benson did get to come back today to give you the talk and let you hear from him what happened in his life that led him from being an 8th grader forward to being the governor of New Hampshire. So it's with pride today that I welcome him as our guest, and on behalf of Doug McDonald, our superintendent, who's out of the state at this moment, we'd like to welcome him to our school district at Timberlane, and I'm going to let Jared Pierce do the introductions today of the governor.
Good morning. As you know, I'm Jared Pierce, and I visited Governor Craig Benson at the State House in Concord in January on Job Shadowing Day. I learned a lot about politics and government and attended many meetings. I also learned how old you must be in political office. It was a very interesting day, so interesting that we have Governor Craig Benson here today to talk to you about the choices he made in his education and career since the 8th grade that led him to where he is today. So without further ado, I'd like to present to you Governor Craig Benson.
Good job, Jared. I knew you did a terrific job. Well, that was terrific. Jared didn't tell you all the fun we had, though, so I'll start with that. In my office, I keep a couple of golf clubs, so I got them chipping down the hallway and driving people nuts by doing that. And I also have a model of a Humvee, because I have a real Humvee, and we drove that around the office a little bit, too. But then we did do some real work, so Jared got to experience that work can be fun, and work can be enjoyable in a couple different ways, getting things done, but also enjoying yourself while you're there. I want to take you back to when I was in 8th grade, where you are right now. My daughter's actually in 8th grade, so I have a lot of sympathy for what you're going through right now. There's some big changes coming on in your life. And when I was in 8th grade, I was the smallest boy in the 8th grade. I weighed less than 120 pounds, and I was about 5 foot 2 inches tall. And my dream was to play football in high school. And so when I got to high school, I joined the football team where I was the smallest player on the team. And I got to play, and how I got to play was against all the bigger guys who liked to hit me because I was the smallest one. They knew they could knock me over the easiest. But after a while, I got pretty good at not getting knocked over. But one of my dreams was to be a high school football player, which I ended up being, and my other dream was to grow big enough so that I didn't get beat up every single day in football practice. And that seemed to work out too. Now I'm 6 foot 2 inches tall, so I almost grew a whole foot. When I was in 8th grade, I also thought about what I wanted to be long term. And I had a lot of different ideas of what I wanted to be long term, but I kept settling on the same thing, that I wanted to be my own boss at some point in time. And I never knew what shape or form that was going to take, but I knew that I wanted to work for myself. And as time went on, I knew that I needed to learn skills in order to be my own boss in whatever business that happened to be. And so what I tried to focus on was the important elements of what it took to be successful. And in my case, I happened to be pretty good at math and science. So those were the things that I tried to focus on, because I knew if I had to be in business that I'd have to do financial statements, and that I have to understand in the science world of things how things worked. I never knew what shape the business would be in, but I always thought that that would be important. And I also understood that manufacturing would be important, and understanding the basics of manufacturing, because most likely I was going to have to make a product at some point in time, would be important to me too. During that time frame, I also learned foreign languages. I took a lot of Spanish, not knowing exactly how I'd use it, but it did come into my life later on, unbeknownst to me, as we grew my own business. And then some other places that I thought were important was understanding English and learning how to communicate and write. And what I'm doing with you right now is communicating, and so being able to put my thoughts in words that you understand is very, very important, whether you write it down or whether you speak it verbally. And as I become governor, it's become even more important. So those are the sort of things that were going through my mind. As I went through high school, I mentioned I wanted to play football, which I did. I also wanted to get a job so that I could get to my real dream, which was, by the time I was able to drive, and I grew up in New Jersey, that I would be able to buy my first car out of my own pocket. And so I went off and founded a job in a supermarket and worked very, very hard at that supermarket for almost 4 years, and did everything from stocking shelves to checking out to everything else, and learned a lot about how that particular business worked. And I think that only made me more passionate about having my own business, because sometimes I had bosses I liked, and sometimes I had bosses I didn't like. But I knew I'd like me as a boss. So that's what I wanted to be at the end. When I got to the end of high school, and I studied very heavily in the math and science area, I knew I wanted to go to a business school. And I spent a lot of time going around looking at different colleges I could attend. Some were really big, like Syracuse University. Some were really small, like Babson College, where I ended up going. And what I decided is I wanted an intimate setting where I could understand what was going on from the professors more directly than at a bigger school. So when I went to business school, I again focused on the math aspect of things. I wanted to be a finance major, because I figured if you understand how the money works, that you could understand how the business works better. So I graduated from college having learned all those skills. And then I decided I was going to go to graduate school right then and there. And I went back to Syracuse University because I always wanted that big school sort of opportunity. And when I went to Syracuse University, once again, I focused on the nuts and bolts of operating a business. It was called operations management. And I graduated there with an MBA. Now, when I went to graduate school, I realized that if I didn't go right then and there, I would never go back to school because I'd be too ingrained in working. So that happened to be my own idea. And it ended up working out well. When I started to look for a job, and I ended up working in Boston, and it took me a long time because we were in a recession at that time, one of the things that drew me to the business opportunities I looked at was the opportunity to work inside a business that you were physically doing something that made a difference. So I wanted to work inside of manufacturing. So I went to work at Teradyne in Boston, and I ended up working in manufacturing there and learning the nuts and bolts of building big technology-based systems. And I learned a lot about how that business operated from seeing how the products were engineered and manufactured. After about 3 years at Teradyne, I went to a very small little startup company that was just getting going. And again, I worked to run the manufacturing organization there. And then I decided to go find my own business with a friend of mine. Now, it started out as a very, very small business, just two of us in a garage. We didn't have any money. And we had a dream that we could build something to about 30 people in size. And building cables was how we started this business. Well, unbeknownst to us, we went from building cables to installing cables to building test equipment to test cables to building systems that became the internet. And the internet there was no internet back when we started doing this, but the internet started to happen because of the products we developed through hardware and software. And my understanding of manufacturing and science really started to come into play. Because we had no money, my sort of understanding of how math worked and finance was very important because we had no money and we had to make every end meet. And my communication skills started to get better and better as we got more and more employees. We started out with just 2 of us, but in about 7 or 8 years, we had 7,000 of us. And 7,000 of us was spread in 130 countries throughout the world. Some of these people didn't understand English very well because it was very much a second language to them. And so when you spoke in English, you had to be very precise in what you were saying, otherwise people would misinterpret what you were saying. And so it was important to be very, very crisp in your communications, otherwise they would miss the point of what you're trying to say. All these people from all these different cultures also brought my Spanish into play. Because while Spanish is not spoken completely throughout the world, it is a base language for many other languages. And so I got to use my Spanish a bunch of years after I had taken it. And in fact was complimented a lot of times when I went to Spanish-speaking countries about my accent being pretty good. Now, all the things that I learned in school that I was wondering why the heck I would ever use started to come into play when I ran my own business because you do so many different things. And all that learning really helped me, especially with the cultural aspect of things, because people from the Asian countries are very heavily science-oriented and very heavily math-oriented. Those from the European countries tend to be very, very language-oriented, whether it's a foreign language or whether it's English. And so communications is key in those particular cultures. And I got to use all those different skills, and it was terrific. Our business ended up doing exceptionally well because we had focused on certain aspects of the marketplace that were exploding at the time, and now I'm proud to say that most of the internet is made up of equipment that we used to make. But the fact of the matter is we kept talking to our customers, and our customers kept focusing us on areas where we should be doing. In about 1999, after about 17 years of running Cabletron, I stepped down and started thinking about running for governor. Now, running for governor is different than running a business. But the communication skills, the ability to listen to people and talk to people is very important. So my English skills really are put to the test as governor, much more so than my math or science skills, because there's not a lot of math or science that goes into being governor but for the budget exercise, which I've been happily involved with now for about 5 months. But the budget is one portion of the job, and it ends up not being a significant portion of the job over the long term. The real important portion of the job is communicating with people and making things happen. One of the most proud moments I've had, other than Jared coming up and seeing me, of course, was the fact that we were able to extend to state workers who get called to action in the Middle East what's called differential pay. That's never been done in our state before. And what it means is when somebody's called to service in the Middle East, sometimes they take a pay cut, sometimes they lose their benefits, and sometimes their retirement pay goes away till they get back. I just thought that was plain wrong. So we've fixed that now in state government. So those that are serving overseas that are former state employees are now getting paid at the rate they were paid at before they left. Their benefits are intact, and it's if they're working for the state because the retirement continues to get funded. Those are the kind of differences you can make in state government in a fairly quick order. The other differences you can make extend from people that have disabilities to people that are going to our university system and trying to make things better. And it's been a really fun job, but every single aspect of it is different. And all my education has been brought to bear because you deal with so many people with so many different ideas and backgrounds that you really need to have some information about all those different backgrounds to be very, very successful. So far I've been in the office about 105 days. Now, I'm not counting. And it's been a really wonderful experience to be able to deal with so many different people from so many different backgrounds. And I will tell you that whatever you do, your education is the most important tool you bring to the job. When I worked at Teradyne, they wouldn't have hired me if I didn't have an MBA. When I went to Interland, the next company I went to, they wouldn't have hired me if I didn't have the educational background that I brought to bear. They told me that we want somebody with a graduate degree. When I started my own business, it didn't matter because it was my own business. But the banks wouldn't loan me money if I didn't have an MBA and some really solid grounding in finance. So it did matter. And as I went to visit customers, and they wanted to know what backing we had from banks and what our own resumes were so that they could invest their money in our products, they felt it was really important that we had the right educational background to be in business for the long period of time. And when I ran for governor, God knows everything was sort of subject to open access by the public. But I think a significant portion of the reason that I'm standing here today is because people felt strong in my work background, but my educational background as well. And so I wouldn't be standing here with you today if I didn't go through all the education I possibly could have and maximize those opportunities. And education is not something that ended when I left graduate school. It is something you get every single day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't learn something new about something that interests me and that I don't put that to use at some other point in my life. It's just like my Spanish. I put it on hold for many, many years, but wouldn't you know, I had to pull it out of the closet sometime later and use it again. So what you learn in life is very, very important. You should store it and use it later on. But building up your resume, both in what you learn and having the ability to put it down on paper so people can judge you based on what learning you have accomplished, is very important for your future success in life. If you don't maximize your opportunities, you will close doors to what you can do in the future. And the only thing that limits you from doing what you want is your own ability to exercise your salesmanship to tell people why you should be doing what you're doing. And if they believe you, they'll give you a lot of opportunities. If they don't, they won't. And it's important that you get every educational opportunity you possibly can, because people will look at that as some experience that they can put to good use in whatever environment you want to use it. But by doing that, you will be as successful as you possibly can be, and you can reach your potential. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And if I have a couple minutes, I can take some questions, if that's okay. I can't see. Is that okay? That's fine. Thank you for saving my eyesight. Yes.
Who inspired you to be governor?
That's a good question. When I ran my business, I was very active in getting the electric companies deregulated. I got workers' comp fixed in the state. I got a few other things done, including putting computers in every school in the state and putting internet access in every school in the state. So I was always interested in making things better. I happen to think that my business could not have been successful if New Hampshire was not around. So I wanted to give back. And the ability to give back came to me as going and running for governor and doing things different than have ever been done in a while. Because, I'll be honest with you, I don't need to be governor. And if I get fired because I'm trying to do the right things, that's okay with me. But many other politicians go into it wondering what their next job is going to be. And so they're very careful in their decisions. They want to make sure that they're always right, which nobody ever is. And they always want to make sure that everybody's happy with their decision, and you can't make everybody happy with every decision you make. Sometimes you got to make a decision that doesn't make everybody happy. And that's okay with me because I'm here to do the job well and to put New Hampshire moving forward in a place where it can be successful for the long term. Yes. Well, I have a lot of plans for the future of this state. See, I happen to believe that there's a thing called the American dream. And the American dream should be alive and well here in New Hampshire. I got to found a company in a garage with 2 people and grow it to 7,000 people, which I think is pretty cool. But I have bigger dreams for you. My dream for you is that you dream bigger than I ever thought of dreaming, and you get to fulfill those dreams. And what happens in America is the older generation always sets the younger generation in a place where it can be more successful than it ever was. So if my generation's going to be successful, you have to do better than I ever did. That is my dream for this state. Now that's going to take a lot of work. We've got to fix a lot of things in education. We got to make the economy a little bit different than it is now. We got to bring different companies here. We got to make the healthcare system much more stable than it already is. And then we got to fix state government. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in state government. But those are the sort of the cornerstones of this. But the whole goal is for you to do more than I ever thought of doing. And if we continue to do that, that's called the American dream. It's why America is the most successful country in the world. Because every generation does better than the generation before. Yeah. You know, I haven't used it in so long. I can say que pasa and those types of things. I can be very, but when I was using it, probably 7 or 8 years ago, I got to be fluent again in it. Fluent enough to get by. I won't get crazy here. But when you don't use it for a while, you got to go immerse yourself back in the culture again to get your ear back. And I haven't used it in a while, so I haven't been able to use it. Yes. It depended upon where I was in the point in time. Sometimes I had good grades and sometimes I didn't. I'll be very honest with you. Sometimes I lost interest in school and sometimes I was very focused on school. When I was young, in the 1st through the 6th grade, I was always the second best student in the school. Then, for a while, I lost interest in school through my middle school years, and I was no longer the second best student anymore. In high school, that trend continued. In college, I got a little bit better, not a lot. But then in grad school, I said, you know, I've been fooling around long enough, I got to get serious here. Because in graduate school, you got to have a B average to graduate, not a C average, you got to have a B average. But I ended up with an A average in grad school because I decided I wanted to get serious about doing some things. So my attention for school came and went a few different times. But I always knew I could do the work. Sometimes I didn't do the work as well as I should have, and to be honest with you, there's some times that I look back and say I should have been more focused on doing it and doing a better job because I only let myself down. I didn't let anybody down but me. And if I had done better in school, maybe it would have given me even more opportunity to be successful. And I've done okay in my life, don't get me wrong. But there's probably some things that I should have learned that I didn't learn, that had I learned, I might have been put to better use. I actually don't. I'm very happy doing what I'm doing now, and I'm very happy being governor of the state of New Hampshire, and I'm not a professional politician. That's why I can say I got to do the right things and forget about what the consequences are, because doing the right thing is the most important. How about one of you in the two? Yeah, right there. Thank you. Well, I'll give you 2 things. One of the coolest things is I'm the commander-in-chief of the reserves, the Army and the Air Force in the state of New Hampshire. So I've been out on the flight line. They've given me a flight suit, and I get to hang out with a lot of the service people. But one of the best and worst things I do as governor is I've got to see a lot of young men and women off to service overseas, and they're with their families, and it's very emotional, and it's tough to wish them well because they're nervous about, you know, serving overseas. This goes back a month or 2 ago. That was probably one of the most rewarding things because it's a great honor to see these hardworking people off. One of the more fun things, other than Jared coming to see me, is that I get to ride in a police cruiser. And sometimes those police cruisers have blue lights going and sirens and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's any young guy's dream, to be in a police cruiser, not in handcuffs, with the sirens going. Try one more time. One more. There's probably not many major countries I haven't been to. I've been to pretty much all of them throughout the world. And I've pretty much been to almost every state in the country, too. As my business was in every state and 130 countries worldwide, we had employees in all those countries. I got a chance to go visit them. And a lot of times I would show up in these countries unknown to everybody. I'd just show up. I remember going to France once and just showing up in my office, and everybody was shocked. What are you doing here? I told them I was in the neighborhood. I just wanted to drop by and say hi. But that's the way I kind of ran my business, just showing up wherever I felt like going that day. Yeah. Well, there's pressure on them not to mess up anyway. I have to say, Lauren, who's going to college next year, is 18. And Kristen is going to high school next year, is 14, and they are going through, obviously, some interesting times because they're getting older now. And they're two terrific kids, and I think the biggest pressure that's come on them is the scrutiny of me running for office and all their friends asking them questions, and sometimes some of their friends don't always support what I do, and they probably catch a lot of abuse for that, but they deal with it very, very well. And they're good kids, and they haven't messed up, but they wouldn't be able to mess up anyway because I'd yell at them regardless of whether I was governor or whether I was just a dad who was mad at them. Yeah. Well, we had a plan to deal with paying for people's retirees' health benefits. And one of the things that I think that retirees deserve is health benefits. And one of the proposals we had was to use retirees' money that was set aside because the accounts were doing really, really well to pay for some of those health benefits. The other choice is not to give retirees health benefits. And I happen to think that giving them the health benefits was the right thing to do. How about you? One more time? I'm going to run for, yeah, I plan on running for re-election, yes, thank you. How about right next to you? You will like this. I was the smallest guy in the football team, and I played offensive guard. And I actually got to start a couple games because I did more drills than anybody else, and I was bruised from my head to my toes. They wouldn't give me enough pads. I think they just wanted to abuse me that much more. And I was black and blue from head to toe, but they thought that I was pretty tough, and that being that tough and that small, that I deserved to start a few games and play, and they seemed happy with the way I did it. Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of you, both from your applause and I'm sure from inside your heart, we want to thank Governor Benson for joining us today to share with us his story of how you can go for your dreams. Doesn't matter if you've had some troubles in your life, whether you've had size issues, whether you've had poor grades, your dream can be achieved with hard work, lots of education, and energy on your own part. So we hope he's inspired you this morning and getting to hear him, and we thank him so very much for taking time out of his busy schedule to meet with us today. Thank you again.